Hello again to another Agakala Reacts, and today we will be watching Why Europe Hates Tourists Now from Poser. Another channel that I don't think I've ever seen anything from. So let's just jump into it. Think I'm gonna know where is that going to, but well, we'll see. We learned.
In 2024, the most tourists ever got up out of their country and traveled to a foreign land. Think about that. In all of human history, this year has seen the highest flow of people across the world, not to migrate or conquer foreign countries, but to walk around their markets, drink beers by the beach, and take pictures of random buildings. This is more than even 2019, where there are 1.76 billion trips in total, around half of them being to Europe. Then, when COVID hit and government lockdowns forced the entire industry to cease operations, both 2020 and 2021 dropped to 500 million trips each. Instead of experiencing the outside world, most of us sat at home buying so many physical goods our supply chains broke. But then, lockdowns were lifted, people around the world had lots of extra savings lying around, and they were ready to go out and travel again. At first, it started up slowly, but then, after surviving and thriving through the highest wave of inflation in a generation, 2024 finally broke the world of tourism. Although we don't know exactly how many tourists went out this year, the April to June period of 2024 saw 6% more travelers than the same period in 2019. Nowhere is this more obvious than in Southern Europe. After a particularly few good summers, places like Barcelona, Rome, Athens, and Venice have been booming with tourists. The de facto center of this story, Barcelona, is already up 20% compared to its pre-pandemic levels. And if you've ever been to a touristy area, especially in the summertime, you'll feel it too. Not only are crowds of people everywhere, but the city's infrastructures and services can be strained. City centers are often converted from local shops to ones catering to the much larger and more frivolous tourist population, and it can seriously harm the stability of the local economy. Much like how a natural resource can suck in all the investment in a mining-dependent area, nice weather and beaches can suck in construction resources, transportation networks, and most importantly, young people into the hospitality business, making much of the population dependent on a highly seasonal, often low-paid income. So in the summer of 2024, locals fought back. Across Southern Europe, you can find the welcoming graffiti of "Tourists go home. Why call it tourist season if we can't shoot them?" and the plain ol' "kill a tourist." But no shots were fired. Locals only shot tourists with water this summer during large protests in Barcelona. There were also protests in Malaga and Palma over over-tourism, and a hunger strike in Tenerife over new hotel developments. And city officials across Europe have responded to general discontent with these crowds. New restrictions put crude caps on some of the world's most popular destinations. 8,000 visitors a day in Santorini, 20,000 a day to the Acropolis, and 20 million a year in Amsterdam. They've limited cruise ship dockings in Amsterdam and Barcelona, and these two cities have also banned new hotel constructions. Venice has started charging €5 a day for day trippers entering by land. Portofino will fine up to €270 for idling in a crowded selfie spot. Barcelona has removed a popular...
That last one about idling in the selfie spot, that's probably the right thing to do, you know?
Bus route near one of its most visited destinations from Google Maps. Amsterdam has run a stay away ad discouraging those wild British tourists from using their streets as one big party. Japan briefly put up a fence blocking the view of Mount Fuji from a popular trail to prevent overcrowding. And again with Barcelona, they now put a tourist tax on every night you spend there. I've been hit with this, and it came out to around $4 a night. Nothing too substantial.
I mean, that's nothing new, the tourism tax. It's like Las Vegas have, what's it called? It's not called tourist tax, but it's a resort fee. In my opinion, it's a very similar thing. And the same thing, it's happening for years in Poland, and we were in Paris this year, and that was there too, and I don't think it's something new, so...
If tourism is so bad for the locals who live there, why do so many places around the world want to build up their very own tourist sector? The short answer is... money. In total, the industry was worth around $3.3 trillion in 2023. It also made up 3% of global product, 6% of trade, and somewhere between 5 and 10% of the global workforce. This is a serious business. And if a country does not have many resources or a productive workforce, its history, natural beauty, or beaches can be a great way to kickstart investment.
It's true.
For instance, in Barcelona, the tourists trying to get around the city completely pay for its light rail transit system. Or think of all the historic sites and museums fully run on tourist dollars. That frees up investment for other projects or gives locals a little break from the taxes needed to run them. There's also the income that restaurants, shops,
Yes,
bars,
but
hotels, airlines, and tour companies get, pay their employees, and spread around the area.
well, that's all true. But we have to remember that to have all those tourists coming in, they have to have some place to stay as well, so they can actually spend that money. And then that's where the problem comes. I think especially in Spain, because I'm not sure if that the reason was basically that people just have nowhere to stay. People that work in the city and things like that, because a lot of places that were just basically renting places for locals, they start changing into being a tourist renting. So basically for someone who's coming just for visiting and stuff and charging like extra high thing, isn't it? Isn't that the reason why they actually were protesting so much in Barcelona during summer? Because there is no like a proper, how to explain that? Proper procedures to actually stop from a massive big corporation to buy off all the land that housing was for people that they were working and living there, and changing that into the like hotels and things like that. I think that was the biggest problem, isn't it? It's a very similar situation as it is in San Francisco and in many touristic places.
The money is spread around, yes, prices tend to increase, but so do wages and salaries. Also, if your country is dependent on foreign exchange reserves, that is, a widely accepted currency you can use to buy goods from other countries like US dollars, euros, maybe the occasional yuan, having American, German, or Chinese tourists come and exchange their currencies for the local money can be a great way to build up that reserve. Then there's growth. Southern Europe, whose economies are more dependent on tourism than those in the north, for example 13% of GDP in Italy compared to only 8% in the UK, have grown faster than them after the pandemic. Tourism also pulled Iceland out of financial ruin after the Great Recession, and Barcelona was a dying industrial city before the 1992 Olympics showed it off to the world. Even Amsterdam, a city home to many world-class companies and the hub to one of the richest and most productive populations on Earth, gets 1/7 of their income through tourism. This is a world-leading country in semiconductor manufacturing, finance, and new wave agriculture, and one of their largest exports is still selling their history and their parties. It really is a great way to promote social mobility and build up wealth, which is why middle-income countries like the UAE, Saudi Arabia, China, Georgia, and India are dumping billions into their own tourist paradises. Rich countries, too, have areas begging for tourists to come, either from their own underdevelopment or their undiscovered beauty. I'm sure a place like Iowa would love for you to come visit them. No offense, Iowans. The problem is that so few places actually get substantial crowds that it's concentrating everyone in a handful of areas. Perhaps this rose out of social media, with certain iconic places cementing themselves in American or Asian minds, giving you more clout than going to a relatively unknown area. Or maybe it's because traveling is easier and cheaper than ever. Rising incomes worldwide and the growth in budget airlines have let many people who would never have been able to travel in past decades go out and see the world. New travelers tend to stick to charted out waters and so go where they know they will have a safe and enjoyable experience. Why go to Rwanda when you could start off with Rome? Or, ironically, it's because traveling is getting faster. It's easier to get to places, yes, but it's also easier than ever to leave them. And while this may sound like a solution to over-tourism, in practice it means tourists who bring their problems, crowding and pricing out locals, while not spending enough time in the area to bring the benefits with them. The idea of going to a place, staying maybe 1 or 2 nights if that, and quickly scoring it before leaving could have done more damage to the industry than anything else. For instance, the average length of stay in some harder to reach, less known areas is much longer than in touristy places. In Armenia, it's 11 days, Vietnam, it's 7, in Costa Rica, it's 14 days, but in Greece, it's only 4, in Spain, it's 3, and in France, people stay just an average of 2 days. Alternatively, you could look at the ratio of same-day trips to overnight trips. Here, while the UK, Iceland, and Greece have a ratio of less than 0.1, meaning over 10 times more people stay overnight than go for a day trip, Spain and Italy have a ratio of 0.5, and France has one of 1.9, almost twice as many day trips as stay trips. It
Because it's
may
in the
be
center of
easier
Europe,
than
I
in the
guess.
past to leave a city on newly built high-speed rail
That too
networks,
as well, yeah.
but it's also incredibly easy to leave via water on the floating city you booked a trip with. Cruises can carry up to 5,000
she didn't
people,
even think
generally
about
docking
that.
in one port in the
That the cruises would be the reason for the one-day trips, isn't it?
morning
And he said
before leaving
France
the
in
evening
general.
and sailing throughout the night. They generally like to stick to one sea, day tripping in familiar places people may want to visit but not book a full trip to. And to anti-tourist advocates, cruise ships usually get the first blame in their over-tourism crisis. Policies to address it almost always start off with limiting cruise ships because it's much easier to regulate one ship which needs to dock in a specific port whose company needs to register with the city than it is to regulate 100,000 individual day trippers who may arrive by road, air, or rail, companyless. So places like Amsterdam, Barcelona, and Santorini have all limited how many cruises can dock a year, as well as where they can dock, being banned from the city centers. Less day trippers in the center of the city should resolve some of the in and out over tourism these cities have been grappling with. But the only thing that's really changed in Barcelona, a bus route now connects the new dock to the city center.
Yeah. That would do it as well, isn't it? Because if people want to get somewhere, they're going to get somewhere, no matter what's going to happen. So yeah. Obviously, I would love to go to all those places as well because they are very beautiful, and I think that's one of the reasons why people keep going there, because they just want to see something that they've seen on friends or even, and it's just you see those pictures online, and now with your phone and being able to see all those pictures in literally not even click of a mouse but tap of your finger. It just basically makes it everyone to try and, oh, I would love to see that on my own, you know? So obviously people are not going to stop travel because someone in that place they want to travel. A lot of people probably doesn't even realize that they're not welcome, but it's, I don't know. So far he didn't say anything about the housing crisis, so we'll see if he's gonna get there.
By far, the largest complaint about tourism has to do with living costs.
Never mind,
Specifically, how much it takes to buy a house. For many years, we lived in a kind of segregated housing market between locals and tourists. Locals would live in apartments and homes, and tourists would stay in a separate hotel bubble. Since hotels didn't add or take away from the stock of housing in the city, they didn't affect locals' prices
That's not
all
like
that
that anymore.
much, other than through the extra money they pumped into businesses. But with the rise of rent-sharing services and apps, particularly this one, this has changed. Instead of the naive idea of renting out a portion of your home to a guest, many properties, including many which were once used for housing, have now been transformed into short-term rentals. This does reduce the amount of homes locals can live in, raising the rest's prices. There are now those who buy up multiple apartments in the city center to turn them into rentals, taking some of the tourist dollars away from the hotel industry, though these large buyers remain fairly rare outside of a few particularly touristy cities. Across Europe, only 2% of hosts manage more than 5 properties, while over 75% of hosts only have 1. This might lead to the hotelization of certain neighborhoods. What once could have been contained in one building by the beach has now spread to an everyday street with nice views and good returns on their rentals. Gentrifying it, if you will. Which makes you kinda think, aren't these new hotel bans a little bit ridiculous? Hotels are outside of the zero-sum game between houses and short-term rentals. They can take on tourists while not reducing the housing stock. So unless housing demand falls, a hotel ban without ban on the conversion of homes to rentals would make...
That doesn't, like, I'm kind of agreeing with him, doesn't really make sense for banning the new hotels when they are specifically built for that reason and just being able to be just used for that. Personally, I rather book a hotel. You go into the, like, I'm not going to say I never use Airbnb. I use Airbnb maybe once or twice, but the fact is that was in the beginning of the existence of Airbnb, and that I was already finding it's kind of difficult with the fact that you have to often back then it was, and still a lot apparently, is that basically you have to be there on certain times, and then you have to call and things. I just don't want to do that. And then now apparently all that stuff about the cleaning the whole apartment before you leave and stuff like that. Yeah, I understand taking out the trash, but taking off the duvet covers and washing them and drying them and stuff like that? No, I'm not going to do that. This is not I'm going for vacation. I'd rather be, and as well that a lot of times when I'm checking places where I want to go, hotels are not that much more expensive in my opinion. After you add all the extra cost of Airbnb and stuff like that, for the cleaning fees and stuff like that. So I rather stay in the hotel where you have a 24-hour desk, someone at the desk, and it's, like, I don't know, I'm just finding it more comfortable. I understand that some people rather have an apartment to themselves, but yeah, there should be something that basically regulate the amount of apartment that can be rented out to tourists, things like that. So I'm agreeing with him on that.
Prices rise for both homes and hotels, pricing out both locals and tourists alike. Though I guess that's good if you only want to attract rich guests. A United Nations study which looked at 43 European cities and regions could give us some insight into the short-term rental situation across the continent. The average European region had 35,000 Airbnb rentals, though this number goes up to 200,000 in places like London and Paris. That alone doesn't tell you how much of a city has been transformed into Airbnbs. Instead, you could look at the total housing stock used for short-term rentals. Here, the average was 7.6% in 2022, with every single location studied far higher than their 2018 levels, especially these places. The Balearic Islands have dedicated a fifth and a third of their housing stocks to short-term rentals, and Girona, a small city in northeastern Spain, has done an absolutely insane 60%. Both Girona and Mallorca are also the most economically dependent on these rentals too.
Isn't it Girona? Isn't the Girona the place where Ryanair flights are going to mostly? Isn't it Barcelona, Girona? I'm not sure about.
5% of their total GDPs. And it should be noted that unlike the European average mentioned before, over half of managers in these two areas host over 5 properties. Prague is the only other European city with this superhost issue, but they seem to be grappling with it. Lastly, we could look at the transient population, the total number of people using short-term rentals divided by the population of the city. It gives a sense of how much of the city is sleeping in an Airbnb throughout the year. Here, smaller, more tourist-dependent cities obviously have higher transient populations, peaking with Bari at over 100%. But among major cities, it varies heavily. Most are between 5 and 10%, but it can reach up to 40% in places like Florence and Dublin. Interestingly, the center of anti-tourism, Barcelona, has a quite low transient population of less than 5%, suggesting its Airbnbs may not push out as many homes as in Northern Europe, though this doesn't take into account their geographic concentrations, as most Airbnbs are likely found in the city center, hotel population, or which services tourists frequent at which times, so Barcelona might still end up with a more overcrowded city.
Well, so far, so in the last break I was talking that he didn't got to it, but now he did, so, and I did kind of stop there talking about the fact that, yeah, and funny enough, guess what ad came up now? For hotels. So yay. No, I'm personally prefer to be in the hotel. Um, and yeah, but I think what they if they think that there's a problem with overcrowding and overcrowding obviously, but basically you I guess the limiting the amount of tourists that they can visit your city, it's a one option, but then another one would be to just look into how many of the houses were changed into one stay or tourist housing, so and try to actually handle that. Oops, forgot to put the volume up.
Or which services tourists frequent at which times, so Barcelona might still end up with a more overcrowded city. This can have some real effects. It's undeniable the price impact having 30% of your city's housing stock transformed into tourist rentals can have, though another effect could be the volatile income which seasonality brings with tourism, as real housing affordability relies on both cheap houses and high incomes.
That must have been unusual, isn't it?
This effect could be as much as 10 times stronger than housing concentration on prices, at least on homes by the Adriatic. And with these effects comes a price diffusion into surrounding areas. As locals are priced out of a home near the city center, they start moving into surrounding areas, raising their homes' prices, sweeping throughout the region. One of the worst cases of this is in Venice, whose population in its historical center has halved in the past 2 decades. Almost all of Venice's depopulation has been from emigration rather than natural decline, as locals can no longer afford to live on the island. From 175,000 people in the 1950s, Venice now has less than 50,000, as tens of thousands have moved to mainland Venice and elsewhere, bringing the historical city back to the population it had in the Middle Ages, but by no means has that reduced the number of people staying inside of it. So what could be done? It seems like almost all the solutions to this crowding, both put in place and proposed, are ones pushing for degrowth, or the reduction of the tourist industry, and it kinda makes sense. A city government can't really restrict global tourism demand, but they can cut back their tourism supplies. That is, their accommodations and ways of getting to the city. That's where these hotel and cruise bans are coming in. But does that risk killing their golden goose? It's not just those on the top who benefit from overseas dollars, but many average people who, while maybe not seeing it explicitly, can see a reduction in their taxes and increases to their pays. So a better solution might be to actually increase the city's tourist supply, making each stop a little less crowded. But since that can't be done quickly, another would be to spread it out throughout the country or to the off-season. Perhaps to start programs with scouting agencies to develop the interior's tourist sector. That's a tough sell though. Would you rather go to a small town in the middle of Portugal, see some cork farms and, I don't know, cows? Or go to Lisbon with their vibrant streets, long history, tourist amenities, and easy modes of transport? Another option could just be better coordination between cruise lines and city governments. Instead of dropping 4 cruises off in Barcelona at the same time to dump a logistical nightmare on the city, perhaps spread it throughout the day or the region. Or hey, why not throw taxes at it? Those cruise visitors to Barcelona are going to be hit with a new tax if they stay for less than 12 hours. That's on top of an already €7 tax for staying the day. Yeah, that's not going to do much, is it? These taxes are more for leveraging their position as a tourism hub to raise some extra money than they are to discourage tourists from coming. Venice's day charge raised €2.5 million during its 29 days of service, but it didn't seem to cut down the numbers inside city gates. Taxes do work to discourage tourists, but only in the beach and drinks realm of tourism, those areas people go to specifically because they're cheap and warm. For instance, a 10% hike on tourist taxes in the Maldives was found to reduce the number of tourists by an average of 5.5%.
That's a lot.
For the culture and history realm of tourism, taxes don't work well to discourage anyone.
Won't.
You can't really tax away someone who is dying to see the Louvre, especially when they've already spent so much to come to the city. If these places still can't control the flow of tourists, well, then it's bound to create a reaction, like with Barcelona's Assembly of Neighborhoods for Tourism Degrowth, an association of locals with interests like removing tourist flats from the city, ending tourism promotion, the reduction of the Barcelona airport, and first water rights for citizens, which seems to be the route the city is going. Along with their hotel construction ban, a revocation of over 10,000 hosting permits will eliminate 155,000 beds from the city center currently used by tourists. Unless smaller areas grow and spread tourists out in the coming years, assemblies like this will only become more popular, as the problem at that point could only be mitigated by cutting housing and transport supplies. And from the way it's looking now, more people are ready than ever to travel next year.
Yeah,
Carbon neutral pellet stoves are not only cheap to run.
definitely. Well, yeah, I'm agreeing with him in a lot of things. And I was kind of talking over the video, so I don't really have much to add now. So, yeah, thank you very. What do you think about all that situation? Because I think his points were very good. Some of the reasons and the ways to go around it that he mentioned should be good as well and work. So yeah, hopefully they're gonna do something about it. So thank you very much for watching, and I see you tomorrow. Bye.